Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a very informative upload to share with you, a very informative subscriber interview. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. Merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. Doesn't cost you a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. And please, leave a comment. Why? Well, because these things, they do help. And guys, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's very informative subscriber interview. Shall we? All right, everybody. I have our special guest, Steph, with us this evening. Steph, how are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty well. I haven't had any major sickness in a couple weeks now, maybe a week. And, a couple more weeks, I'll go get the biomarkers checked and get some imaging. But I think I'm going to do all right and stuff. And, I have the standard allopathic medicine, and I'm getting some good depleted deuterium treatments and some Ormus on the side. And I don't know. I feel pretty good, and I understand the type of cell group and cytology I'm dealing with, so I'm pretty happy. And still a little bit weak, but if I come clean on the cancer and clear that, I can get the artificial hip I need, and I feel that my life will turn back around.
Most definitely. So, yeah, it's been about a week since I've had you on. I mean, we've texted back and forth. Now, you had texted me, I think it was yesterday or today, and I think it was yesterday, about a interesting... wait, first I want to clear something up, okay? Just so people are aware of something. Now, Steph reached out to me, and he had said, I've got this couple experiences that I've had happen. And he shared the first one with us. I'm not dragging him along, and he's not dragging anyone along. We're just sharing information that he knows, and I'm not speaking for you. And if you feel like I'm overstepping or saying something wrong, please stop me. But okay. Steph, is having a difficult time sharing some experiences that he's had. Through time, he may or he may not, but he reached out to share certain things that he was aware of, and that's what we're doing. I got an email from that person that I had mentioned, and he said, stop dragging Steph along. We want to hear encounters. And, I think the information that Steph has shared with us has been, it really does kind of cast a new light on things. And it's interesting. Encounters are cool, but scientific facts when it comes to these things are just as cool or cooler in my eyes. So, yeah, that's where we're at with the encounter stuff and experiences that he's had. But he partook in a search effort for a missing person, and I will turn the floor over to you so you can share the information on that.
That's fine. And I also feel you spoke appropriately, so I have nothing to add or amend in that. So thank you.
Yeah.
2021 in February, we had a person go missing about 20 miles from where I live up here. And on February 5th, we were asked to join in. And so all of us local that were retired or inactive at the moment went up there on the 5th of February to the town of Nederland. And we all deployed from the Hesse Trailhead, which is just down the road from the Eldora Ski Resort. And about 12 years ago, I used to live in that little tiny, it's about 15 homes there in Eldora. I lived right at the four-way stop there, right before Hesse. And an individual named Josh Hall had gone missing. There had been a pretty nasty storm that jumped on top of him, but that was a little unusual because I actually knew Josh on a passing basis because he used to go to Backcountry Pizza right there in downtown Ned. And it's a very small town, like 3 blocks in the mountains. So he was actually pretty well known around there, even though he didn't live there. He came up from a suburb of Denver called Arvada a lot. And nondescript guy. And I mean, like, just knew him by name. And I didn't even know his last name until he went missing. And a local friend of mine also was a good friend of theirs. So we got a little bit of data from them. And we were authorized to go in. So we went up the northern route from Hesse because it divides south into the lower Hesse Basin and north up into the 4th of July campground. His body was found 5 months after we went up there. No one found any sign or any movement of him, and they kept saying his cell phone pinged. But the problem is up here is that if you get a cell phone ping, mine has actually been 30 miles off of my position. The tower triangulation up here at that time, just a year ago, was very, very limited. So telephone pings up here aren't exactly very accurate. So they thought he had disappeared around Devil's Thumb Lake, but the problem is there's like 6 Devil's Thumbs ranging from Boulder all up and down the divide. So, but this one in particular, the first thing they thought that is he had gotten lost on trail somehow and had fallen into a tree well. And a tree well is when the snow gets really deep, but not around the bottom of the tree, and you can slide into it like an antlion pit, if you're familiar with those.
Yeah.
And they're next to impossible to get out. And he had a dog with him. I don't know. We were only up there for that day, and then they wanted only forest rangers from the Arapaho, and they even brought some people in from Route, which is up where Steamboat is, just to bulk it out. And they ran over with FLIRs, and there's quite a few airports, Boulder Airport and Jeffco, just on the Front Range, very short distance up. The average altitude was probably around 8,500 to 9,000 feet. And it was very interesting. The thing is that if you go north of the Hesse Trailhead, you'll reach the Arapaho watershed, which is a federally protected land. And there's the town of Ward that's near it, and almost everybody in the town of Ward that's gone into that area has been confronted in a very pleasant fashion, nothing overly aggressive, by armed individuals that were contractors like I used to be. And I don't know who any of them are. It's just that there's a lot of people with M4s that can step out of the brush and tell you, hey, you need to turn around. They're not jerks about it. And, you know, people know better, and they just turn around and get out of there. I've talked to quite a few hunters who've run across that. I don't go to that area, and I don't know any operations in that area, but the Arapaho Watershed Federal District also has a small micro dam in it, which they say supplies water, but it's such a small one that I have no idea what they could be supplying, so that's very interesting. You can see that on Google Earth if you actually go look at it. It's pretty nondescript. You have no idea what they're protecting there, but then also don't know if there's editing or anything. But his body was found about 4 miles off the 4th of July area, within probably less than a half a mile of the federal boundary there. And so I've always wondered about that because they could not find him. And I wonder if you got had a bad encounter, but those people are professionals and they never have and every single encounter people have had, which is most in Nederland and Ward, have always ended the same way. They're told to turn around, and people are very polite. And guys come out of nowhere, and the people turn around. And so, but there's also a lot of evidence in that area, and a lot of people talking about the creatures that can cloak, or what I would probably think is a pull-off. So I'm going to stop for a second. Were you going to say something?
No, I was listening. Now, speaking of this, I had actually, I think I'm going to hit mute real quick. Hang on. All right. So I just wanted to just ask off mic if it was okay, to ask a question or if it could be answered. Now, when you had said, certain people come out of the woods or come out, and they, they're asked to turn around, certain people meaning government people or
A lot of people describe them carrying M16s, but I believe they're carrying M4s, and they look like they're dressed for appropriate mountain. It's not uniforms, but they do have a laminate badge on them, as well as a metal badge from everybody's descriptions. I have not seen this because I don't go into that area.
right.
So but it's pretty consistent. They're dressed more like irregulars and different armies and stuff like that, but there's no uniforms. It's just a lot of times they'll step out or an ATV will come tearing up on them out of nowhere. But once again, they're not like throwing guns down on people
Right.
and holding them to the ground. They're very polite from every single encounter I've talked to. In fact, I have one gentleman that lives in the town of Ward. It's a small mining town there. And he actually is going to reach out to you here in a couple of weeks to talk about some other experiences too. And he's one of the gentlemen that has run across that.
Now, so they're obviously they're not DNR. They're not any type of conservation wildlife agents or anything. They're just pretty much unknowns is how we can label them.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked. They just tell them this is a federally protected watershed. You're risking arrest. Please turn around.
Yeah.
And, they don't seem, everybody has described them as not to screw with, and they're eminently polite.
Right.
And they're not pointing guns. They have them on just across the body, and they're very relaxed in their nature and demeanor from everybody's description. And that's really consistent from everybody I've talked to. And this is a well-known local fact in Nederland and Ward, even all the way into Gilpin County to the south. And so it's very interesting to me. I've talked to one individual who claims, and unfortunately I don't know whether to believe him or not, that there is a disseminated radar array, which is just a field of like 6 to 8 foot antennas up there. But that would make it something similar to a mini HARP array. So that could be part of it. But that whole area is quite clearly marked on the map as a protected watershed. But the only thing they say is it's federally protected and you're risking arrest.
Yeah. And walking upon or having someone like that walk upon you, all polite, but still having an M4, but being polite as can be, that can be even more scarier than having it drawn on you, because you're kind of like, wait a second, why does this guy have this gun and why is he so polite? I'm just gonna leave.
Well, I admit to using similar tactics at other sites in different countries and a couple places here in the United States, and but that was security. But it's usually, you don't come out and try to be all intimidating. You just try to be informative and just say, hey, this is not a place you need to be. This is very dangerous. You're risking arrest, please. It's almost the same script we use on certain sites in the past. That's why I found it funny that it matched so much of our protocols, because if you see one person or two people, which they usually are one or two people, then that probably means you're not seeing other people that got you dialed. But that's standard op as opposed to anything over the top. And it's not as exciting, I guess, but for storytelling, but it's always been a weird anomaly up there, and it's pretty well known.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
a weird anomaly.
But I found it interesting that his body was found half a mile from there, and it's not hyper reported, but a lot of the old timers up there that still go in and guerrilla pan and actually go looking for pegmatites, the vagacious cavities, because there's a lot of like weird localized pockets of topaz, and there is a kimberlite vein of green spike kimberlite, which is where diamonds form, that goes from mile marker 37.5 on the peak to peak all the way up to the Wyoming border. I mean, all of them are industrial grade diamonds, but there have been some big low value diamonds found, which are still worth a lot of money. That's why De Beers had an office here in Boulder, and I think they might still have one up in Fort Collins. It's been forever. But what's another interesting fact was his dog was found at mile marker 40, and Hesse Trailhead's about mile marker 23. And the dog was found without a leash, lost a lot of weight, but was still relatively healthy. And mile marker 40 is about where the University Research Station is, just west of the highway up towards the divide.
How many miles would that be from 23 to 40?
Oh, well, 17 approximately, but I mean, that's the road winding around, so it's probably more realistically 12 as the crow flies. What I find interesting is that the body was found half a mile on the south side of the watershed, and the dog was found about 2 miles north of the watershed on the peak-to-peak highway itself. And like I said, it lost a substantial amount of weight. Its leash and collar were missing, but it was quickly identified as the dog. It was chipped. And another interesting fact is it's very close to the 37.5 mile marker campground, and that's known as Gordon Gulch. That's got a dark history. There used to be a Hells Angels stop back in the 60s and 70s, and we actually found 2 different winds, which are a type of shaft that were filled almost to the top with the original Schlitz pull tab cans. Remember that?
No.
Oh, Schlitz Beer from the 60s and 70s. They had the pull tabs that you pull off and threw away. They weren't integrated into the can. So obviously there's been a lot of drinking there, and they got chased out of there after a while, after like a decade and a half, but that was mostly the town of Ward got sick of them, and Mountain Justice kicked in, and that ended. But there's a local man that I know, and he also goes to the pizza place, and he was there about 10 years ago, and some travelers were there in their RVs, and these are not very good people, and they are attacking his friend, and he went to defend his friend, and he's actually pretty skilled and a good brawler, but he got hit in the back of the head with a shovel, and they tried to cut his head off with that shovel like 4 or 5 times. Helicopter had to come in and take him to Denver, and he crashed 5 times on the way in, and now he looks like he survived, but now he looks like he has a head sewn onto him because he's just got this horrible wounding all around his neck. But nicest guy in the world. Pretty traumatized by that, though. Yeah. But there's been a lot of there are no known disappearances in that area of 37.5. But the odd thing about that is that's always been considered a dangerous place. There's been a lot of violence there. There's been a lot of people that got wounded and wouldn't talk about it. And there's always the ghost stories. And there's a couple interesting caves that go into the rock, probably about 30 or 40 yards. And there's a whole bunch of swampy stuff in there you can actually sink into, and they'll never find your body. It's those weird riparian lowlands that fill up with silt and just hold the water so it looks like solid ground, but it can eat you solid. And there's about 2 or 3 mines that are filled with water to the top, and the forest alone can get on top of those. But one interesting guy that was unfortunately not a good witness because he did a lot of hallucinogenics that claimed to be creatures that he couldn't see that were coming out of the water and like drying off and then disappearing. So it's got a weird background, and since 37.5 is only 2.5 miles or so from where the dog was found, and there's a lot of weirdness there. And then you got the federally protected watershed, the guy being found dead on one side, his dog on the other. A dog couldn't get through that watershed without being detected. So if they have the standard detection gear that I believe they do. So I found a lot of that, just everything adds up unusual.
Right.
The person was said to have died of exposure.
Yeah, hypothermia or something.
Yeah, but they can never find. You can't tell me that after 5 months, and they never would specify the exact location. It actually changed like 8 or 9 times. It was this way, that way, and this way. And I was luckily was able to know somebody who was on the initial find, and they tipped me off on where it was found. And I was like, that's a half mile just south of the protected area. He's like, yeah, and there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, it's just hypothermia to us and exposure. And I was like, what do you think? And he's like, I don't. So not as exciting as a lot of different stories, but I found it funny that you have your own personal individual near you that you're interested in, and I have one near me. So.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting because I'll just kind of, I went up there and I had talked about this case, or that you and I were going to talk about it. I didn't know when, because you were supposed to be, you were coming home today. But I figured maybe in a couple days, you needed a break or whatever. And I had mentioned that we were going to talk about a missing person case. And I had actually talked about the pull-offs and how you had mentioned that. And when I was up in Tom Mezek, up in Horicon, and I was looking around in the trees, it was very different when I went up there, because prior to the last time I spent time there, there was no trees. It was just buds, or not no leaves. It was just buds on the trees.
Did say that.
And today, it was all leaves, and very, very weird. I got an eerie feeling. I'm not going to say anything was out there with me, but there was some weird, loud noises, and just an eerie feeling that I got. But the pull-offs is, and a lot of people talk about them, or look behinds, or crawlers. I find it interesting that what you had mentioned with the person that was a local up there, and he on hallucinogenics, kept saying he could see things coming out of the waters and stuff like that. It's kind of sad that he was on that many hallucinogenics, or he had a history of it where people wouldn't believe him, because maybe he was telling the truth about what he was seeing. Who knows?
His descriptions, I did not communicate that to him or the other people that have heard that. His descriptions were unnervingly accurate for the data I have. And so that's what caught my attention. It's not that I think he's a credible witness so much, but he is an incredible witness that actually had data that matched what I know without any cross-correlation. And that's more of a signal to me to, keep an eye out and look.
Yeah.
So just, it's odd. I mean, the whole thing, I can't do anything about it, and I don't have anything that can reveal it, but mentioned the federally protected watershed, the locations, and the story's changed quite a few times. And
I noticed that.
I trust the individual that gave me the information because they're SRS at a high standing. So
yeah, I noticed that there was a lot of different, because when I looked up the case, there was a lot of different information given, just different like you said, different locations, different this, different that. And I find that fascinating, because not in Tom Mezek's case, but in a lot of other cases where people have gone missing and found dead or never found, a lot of the media reporting is off of each other. They're definitely not working together, which makes me wonder if the powers that be, or whoever controls the media, is feeding the media different information to kind of just confuse people.
it seems like that, but I forget the name of the law, but it's never associate malice with an action when stupidity can explain it. But still, another interesting fact is from the person I talked to, the body had not been nibbled on, and a lot of people don't know that if a body gets lost deep in the snow, be it animal or a person, the voles, that's VOLE, and all the ground animals that tunnel under the snow have no problem with being a little bit carnivorous, just to pull some extra stuff in. And if bones are exposed, all the rodentia up here will eat antlers and bones because they're basically the only source of calcium they have up here. That's why you can hardly ever find antler sheds, is because all the different rodents rip them apart. And if you look at old bones that have been out there for anywhere from 1 to 10 years, you can just see all the little mice striations on them from the little incisors scraping off the calcium from the bone. And the fact that the body was untouched by any of the burrowing rodents is very unusual.
Yeah.
That's a puzzler too. And I would have no theory on that one from anything I do know or what this is, other than either they didn't find it or environmental conditions are wrong. But the rodents up here, especially the voles and quite a few mice species, are just widespread. You can't go anywhere without finding an esker, which is the remains of their burrow under there. I mean, they're just everywhere. So I find it unlikely that he wouldn't be scavenged. Even a coyote, a fox will dig down, and because they'll go down into tree wells and get somebody. But I have no idea if he's in a tree well. He was in trees, but that doesn't mean he had actually fallen into one.
Yeah, he was, and it's crazy about the dog, and he was young. I mean, he wasn't an older person. 27 years old, fairly fit. I mean, just from what I've read and the pictures that I've seen of him, he seems very active in hiking, in the outdoors. There's a lot of pictures prior to his disappearance of him hiking.
Oh, he's up there almost every weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a regular at the main strip there, which is like just a parking lot strip thing there next to the grocery store. And he's always at Blue Moon Brewery or up at Backcountry Pizza and going into Big Bear Sports to get a little bit of extra equipment here and there. And he was a well-known regular on the Hesse Trail. I used to go on the lower Hesse Trail because there's a particular type of orchid there I like to get, and some osha root and a couple other different plants that I use. And, I've ran across him more than once in that area. And kind of that was the lower trailhead, but, he was on the upper 4th of July trailhead, which, on a weird side note, that 4th of July trailhead, I have a friend in the local tow shop in Boulder. They've pulled over, they pull about 5 to 6 suicides a year off the 4th of July campground. But that's not all that uncommon. The Peak to Peak's a beautiful place with a whole bunch of scenery. A lot of people go up there in a bad state and find a nice scenic place and check out. But 4th of July campground has a very strange consistency of suicide, and it's sad. I wish people wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You can't hurt yourself without hurting other people. I wish people would take that to heart, but it is an odd, anomalous fact, because you usually get a couple overlooks in different parts of the Peak to Peak highway where people pop themselves. But the 4th of July campground is a beautiful place, and it's near Hidden Lake, but I mean, it's not really an aesthetic place itself. You kind of have to hike out like a half mile to get to some really nice areas. And I don't know why people would keep popping themselves there, but whether it's related or not, I don't know. It's just an interesting anomaly for that area, just something that coincides with the event, but it's probably not part
strange of it. That like it's forested, and it is. I'm like you said, it's not scenic, but I'm imagining it's if you're a hiker or anybody that loves wilderness, it's probably a beautiful area. It's strange that a place like that on a mountain, and then there's the suicide forest, which is in Japan, which is a mountain, not really beautiful.
I just heard about that last year. I hadn't heard about that before last year. That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's just a strange place that people just let's go out here, and just very weird things like that are weird that happen. Now, you had said something about like there's like a history of ghost stories out there. What's that, like Native American ghost stories, or just old mining
37
stories?
The 37 and a half mile marker, which is called Gordon Gulch, is up the highway and about 2.5 miles from where the dog was found.
Yeah.
But yeah, that place just has a bad history of, you had the Hells Angels there, and there were quite a few fights and possible murders and possible hidden bodies. The place is riddled with mine shafts everywhere.
Yeah.
The old joke in the town of Ward nearby is that if everybody dead stood up at once, and we'd have a big old population problem up here.
Yeah.
But that area is an odd place. It just always seems to go through dark phases. Like after the Hells Angels, there was actually a whole bunch of that people were actually manufacturing coke on one of the houses that was right next to it, and they're always just chasing off people and being violent. And everybody there's always had some sort of knocking on the vehicles. That's a really common one. But people that go there usually aren't really intrepid campers, because that's actually a very easy dispersed camping place to go. So it could be a squirrel running across it, a pine cone, and they just don't know the forest. I used to camp there a lot when I first got to the state back in '90, because it was a beautiful place and no one knew about it. It's kind of in its a lull of bad action, and there's lots of nice plants to harvest and tons of wild raspberries and all sorts of good alder to grab for smoking fish. And it was just kind of weird. And then about 99, about 2000, it just got a whole bunch of transients started calling it their home and just trashing the place. And it was just, sheriff couldn't be bothered. And it got so bad after they tried to chop that guy's head off. They cleaned it out again. But yeah, there's always an odd story or two coming out of there. And I don't know, it's just an interesting artifact of an area that's right next to it. It's got a couple weird natural caves that have formed in there, which is unusual for granite. You would expect that in limestone, which can be, mechanically and chemically weathered out.
Yeah.
But caves and heavy-duty granite are very rare. There's a lot of garnet there. I mean, it's not very valuable, but you can find garnet everywhere in the rocks, and there's little micro diamonds, but so they're not worth anything. But it is just an interesting place geologically, and it's always got a weird history of violence.
That's weird, that violent, the history, that's just something that, it's almost like you're in a beautiful location, because, I mean, I've always thought of Colorado as very beautiful. I mean, even though I live in the Adirondacks, beautiful mountain area itself, but, I've always wanted to kind of go out into, the Pacific Northwest and check out the big mountains, where they're,
oh yeah.
And, it's just strange. You wouldn't think that there'd be a lot of darkness, but yet there really is. There's a lot of legend, a lot of just really odd weirdness, and the violence is one. It's like you said, with the minerals and crystals and stuff like that, with granite, it's usually, some weird things happen around that, but it's so weird. I can't, that almost makes me wonder if that has anything to do with the disappearances, the violence, or, because bad things are usually attracted to bad places.
What's interesting is that there's no report of a Bigfoot type creature. I mean, down in Colorado Springs, they got the elk killer, or I don't know what to think about that one. But up on the peak to peak, there's never been reports of Bigfoot that were credible. There is one guy who wears a Bigfoot costume and goes to where the Amtrak goes through the Moffat Tunnel, and he'll jump around and as the passenger car goes by, but everybody knows about that. So it's just kind of funny. I think you can see that stuff on YouTube too. It's absolutely hilarious. But he's not doing it to do a hoax. He does that every October, just up front up there at the end of the Moffat Tunnel.
Right.
But the rest of that area, the peak to peak from Central City Blackhawk area up to the Rocky Mountain National Park, it's always darn near invisible things or bear dog-like things. But, the encounters are very fleeting and very, very quick. And there's just not a lot of talk about it. I mean, everybody's seen something up here, one time or another if you talk to them, but most people can't explain what they see, or if they do, they don't want to talk about it. So, the police force up here is really mellow and laid back, and if you hadn't reported to them, they wouldn't really care, but they wouldn't take it seriously.
Right.
The few people that have reported things to them, they just say, oh, it's probably some kids from Denver filming a movie, just don't worry about it. And, you get the missing cats and pets and all sorts of things, but we also have an abnormally high mountain lion population. In Boulder County alone has about 800 known lions, and there's probably a lot more. And Gilpin County to the south probably has a same amount, but it has a much smaller population and more dispersed. So it's a strange place. It's not like your typical hotspot, but the stuff up here is, to my knowledge, fast and brutal. And, I've seen some odd stuff up here myself, and it's never been an open threat, but almost everybody up here carries. It's not like a big deal. It's just kind of like you live in, there's some pretty, we coyotes in here and there, and about every 7 years we have distemper and rabies just kind of go through the mountain. Tends to trim the population, and so during that time period is usually actually pretty dangerous. A lot of nature gets some issues, and we've had a lot of tourists really severely hurt by mule deer. So that because they aren't carrying, and the mule deer are much bigger than a standard whitetail. So I find it odd that there's no report of a Bigfoot in the area, but plenty of reports of just other creatures.
Yeah, especially there, you'd always think that Colorado would have some sort of, the whole state, being mountainous, and that's very strange. But I mean, like you said, it's got its own other little creatures that are lurking about, and the pull off is one that just, I remember the first time we were talking, and you had said pull off, and then I said look behind, and we instantly knew exactly what each other were talking about. And
I'd never heard. I didn't know what a crawler was. Like I said, I'm not a cryptid person, but I figured that's got to be about the same thing.
Yeah, but I pull off, and I said this in the video that I made when I was up in Horicon. Pull off seems to fit because it's just pulling you right out. It's pulling you off the freaking trail or wherever, and you're gone. And it makes a lot of sense. A lot of these missing person cases, might be Dogman, might be Bigfoot, or might be these pull-off creatures, and we just don't know because nobody survives the attack, or nobody's ever seen again. So,
and I find it odd that the location he was found is only about, I think, 37 miles in a straight line to Rocky Mountain National Park, which, I don't go to that just because it's just got a high incident rate, much higher than people understand. And also, there is a large homeless population that lives along the Peak to Peak Highway in the summer because they can be in the woods and stay out of people's hair, and they can hide or whatever. So I really do believe there's a higher missing population up here than we realize. Once again, I can't substantiate that, but I've seen a lot of people, campsites that were well established, and the police had a real hard time running them out, the sheriffs, and all of a sudden, bam, they're gone. They took off and left a lot of stuff, and it's not just being dirty or sloppy. It's like really they egressed in a hurry, and there's just all sorts of weird stuff going on. So, but whether it's criminal activity and they spook, or if something happens and they just bail, it's kind of hard to tell because they don't work with the locals, because the locals don't want them here. They're afraid they'll burn down the forest. So it's an unfortunate thing. Well, it's kind of a hobby of mine up here since I retired, but I like going around different areas and finding different things. Been foot on the ground in most of Boulder and Gilpin County in every square inch. Another interesting dark fact of the area is just over the divide in Grand County, there's Grand Lake, and that's always had it never freezes in the center of that lake, and there's a small island in it too. What's very interesting in the history there is that the Utes were on that side, and a lot of the other Indian tribes would actually go hunt Utes. It was actually kind of a together sport.
Yeah.
And the Utes were actually considered, other Indians or Native Americans would call them the Black Indians because they were very dark skinned, and they had more of a paleo culture centered around bear and the OSHA route itself. They were on the one of the shores, and I wish I remember what. It's a wonderful treatise and book on the history of them. Got to dig that out sometime again. But the camp was there in their summer camp on one side of the lake, and a couple war bands that I think Arapaho or Cheyenne, I'm not sure, got over the divide. And what's interesting about the divide is that there's a whole bunch of stone forts up there. I mean, they're really just stone circles that are slightly defendable, but a lot of the Ute tribe would actually have people stationed up there to either so they could hold the line a little bit and draw people in to attack them while runners went down to inform the tribes. But one tribe got the better of that, one of the areas around Rollins Pass, and they were all killed, and and the warring tribe was able to get down to the Grand County, Grand Lake area and catch the Ute tribe on the shore. And most of the men fought a holding action on the shore, and they used their improvised fishing rafts to try to get the women and kids and the older people to the center island. And right when they did that, a giant storm came up and dumped everybody and killed them, drowned every single old person, woman, and child in that Grand Lake. And most of the men on the banks, seeing that, retreated. Quite a few were killed, and that reduced the Ute population in all of the Rocky Mountains by almost half, just in one quick multi-hour event.
Wow.
And since then, that lake has been plenty of pictures, which they're probably staged, but plenty of rumors and legends and pictures of footprints coming out of the non-freezing part of the lake. Now, one reason it might not freeze in the bottom is because that lake is very deep, has a very big V profile, filled gorge.
Yep.
So there's probably a lot of water differential and movement in the center, which could open up that center of the lake. But it said it had always frozen over until that happened. But then that's legend. But what's interesting is to this very day, when that lake freezes and it doesn't freeze in the center, there's always people taking pictures of tracks. And these can be anything from what we would consider cryptid tracks to buffalo tracks to just animal tracks, but they all seem to come out of the center of the lake. So that's a really weird lake. I had a friend who nearly got killed there. They were canoeing with her friend on a date, and storm came up and swamped them both. And luckily she had right flotation, and she's actually a very athletic person, and she and her date were able to partially right a canoe and managed to get it up there. But it was lightning, wind. But weather does come quickly up here at 10,000, and so that could be part of it. But yeah, she said she is in fear for her life, and it wasn't just the fear of the environment. It was like that she felt focused on, like something was trying to take her out and her friend out. So I think just a interesting bit of information. And this is only this is just over the divide from the secured watershed and as the crow flies, it's probably only like 7 to 10 miles.
Wow.
So just interesting anecdotal history of the area.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And one thing that's interesting as well is that, and it probably is nothing, but I find it interesting that a lot of these places where people end up missing or disappearing, there's some strange, almost ominous names to them, and he was ironically hiking to a lake called Devil's Thumb Lake. And I just find it, very strange that a lot of places, a lot of people go missing, and there's, devil something, or, just a weird
Diablo.
Kind of name.
That's another name.
Yeah, just a weird, and it probably has nothing to do with it, but it's just an interesting, just tie into it, I guess. And speaking of the Utes always got the short end of the stick. Like
oh God, did they ever?
The Navajos hunted them for sport. It was like with the and I think a lot of the skinwalker myth and legend came from Navajo Ute warring, when the Navajo would supposedly use skinwalkers to watch and infiltrate Ute camps and kill the Ute as they were sleeping or not paying attention. They definitely got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, they're a pretty interesting tribe. They're very Paleolithic when other tribes were actually getting into more tribal times parallel to the Europeans. And until their very end, the Ute were always very secluded culture, especially the mountain Ute. And in fact, the town of Durango is really just this valley town, and it's surrounded by copper deposits. You can actually pan copper out of the streams there. It's kind of funny. But the Ute would often winter in these deep, deep valleys, deep in the mountains, because tribes couldn't get at them in the winter, and they'd find some warm valleys here and there, which are really nice overall weather-wise. But they're surrounded by this. God, now I forgot the name of the mountains out there. Yeah, that's weird. But the mountains on the western slope look like they are formed with an hatchet. I mean, they're with sweeping peaks of the Front Range. They're just these sharp, imposing, almost Alp-like mountains. And, it's beautiful when you see the sun on one side of it and it hasn't come up yet, and you can see these giant 100-mile-an-hour arc winds pushing snow and giant, wonderful spirals and stuff. But you realize it's also like you die in minutes up there. It's just like amazing to see.
Yeah.
So just interesting times. Colorado's a neat state. It's kind of one of the ones that has most of, in my opinion, I think Colorado has some of the most dangerous creatures, I guess, other than normal and not compared to many states, because when they hit, you just never hear about it.
Right.
And there's a lot of encounters in other states, but there's the death count's almost nil, but there's a lot of missing people and a lot of death up here. And there's a lot of independent people that just don't have anybody to know they're missing. There's quite a few places in Rifle, Colorado, before it became consumed by the local ski industry, where they'd come up and find an abandoned cabin. And they're like, well, somebody lived here just recently, and nobody knew much about the people that were hanging out in the woods and stuff. Reminds me of when I grew up in Gatlinburg in the early 70s, and all the Melungeon folk and mountain folk and hedge folk they were going missing left and right during the 70s where I grew up there, but didn't make much news. That one kid was at 68, 69 or something like that. He's a big famous case, one of the tourists over in Smoky Mountains, but
Dennis Martin.
What?
Dennis Martin was his name.
Oh yeah, that's his name. Yeah, but I mean, like, there was such coverage on that, but they really no coverage on the hedge folk and the mountain folk and the Melungeon folk. Just even some of the old residual Cherokee that managed to avoid everybody and not go out on the Trail of Tears. And they were going missing left and right, and they were finding abandoned cabins. And this is all on the in between Gatlinburg and the Cades Cove side.
Yeah. For some reason, there's never it just never makes the news for a lot of the mountain or hill folk in the South. It's sad. Cades Cove, people that disappear there or around there, Appalachia. It just it's almost like society kind of thinks, it's just Appalachian people. Who cares, But there's still people, It just makes no sense to me, and it's disgusting. For a couple months, when I was looking into the deaths from December until April in Virginia, it was really just sad. I had actually called the Virginia State Police public relations woman, and I had said, I'm an independent journalist asking questions, and what can you tell me about the deaths and the missing people going on in Tazewell and Buchanan? And there was a guy named Timothy Richard Honecker, and she goes, I just know about that. And I'm like, well, there's 7 others. It was just almost like they just don't care. And it's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah, the only reason that got any notice is, my father's working at Oak Ridge at the time, so they always do security checks and if anything abnormal comes up. But apparently Child Protective Services at that time, or their equivalent thereof in the area, I've noticed a lot of kids not coming into school anymore. And, they always try to get the mountain folk to go to school and stuff. And they, sent some enforcement officers up, but most of the family, there were a lot of families that were just gone, and the houses were there, and all the other locals wouldn't talk to them, or they would disappear when they came in. And it was just, that was the only reason my parents were worried, because we lived right there near the artificial ski slope that's in Gatlinburg, and we actually had that tram that goes from the ski resort down to downtown Gatlinburg. We were like 4 towers away from the ski resort. We actually had the tower come right over our property, not over the house, but off to the side, probably like 100 feet. So I'd always see that tram go by every day when I was down there. And we were on the edge of the bear preserve, which is now, well, which had a whole bunch of stuff built in after us. And apparently our old house there burned down in that fire in Gatlinburg. Probably, was it 4 or 5 years ago? So yeah, we still got a lot of good. We still have the original signage for our property there, and my parents have it in their garage. So that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
But yeah, they wouldn't let me go out without. There was a local hedge witch named Else Redbone, and she actually would watch out for me and keep people from picking on me. So that was kind of nice. And she taught me a lot of my early plant knowledge and the Smokies. And that really was fun to learn a whole bunch of different things. And I learned a lot of cool things. There used to be a place called Pigeon Forge, which is now Dollywood. But back then they still had the blacksmith area up. And I remember we as little kids would go over there and watch the guy pound out stuff. And he'd help us draw. Now, we were sometimes allowed to, like 2 or 3 of us, get on the pliers and try to draw a nail through the mold, but we're kids. But there was no safety in the 70s. Let the kids play with a hot iron. But yeah, I'd spend the summers in Gatlinburg, and I'd go to school in winter in Tennessee and Knoxville. So it's a pretty nice place.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're coming up on some time here.
Cool.
I want to thank you for coming and sharing this with us. I really appreciate a lot of the information that you've shared with us. And, I hope I didn't talk out of turn in the beginning, but,
no.
It was interesting how this one person, took it upon themselves to, act like I was running the show and you and I hadn't talked, about anything. And, anybody who knows the channel knows that I don't force anybody to say anything. I just, it's their platform. And, if you're not comfortable sharing something at this point, then you're not comfortable. But if you've got something valid to offer, which you have, and a lot of people have talked about, like the eye shine, the camouflage, and things that are very interesting. And like I said in the beginning, I find sometimes encounters are cool. They're very cool, but I like to hear things that make sense, like the eye shine, the camouflage. That is just as interesting, or sometimes more interesting to me. So I appreciate all of the information that you've passed on to us.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize we talk like for half an hour before and after the show. And part of that is there's a lot of things that I really cannot share, and they're not groundbreaking secrets or anything, but they are operational things that I am still under NDA for, and I could get in trouble for sharing. Ironically, most of the stuff people's interested in is classified as environmental hazard by most of the insurance bond carriers for us, so they really don't care about that. And I'm under a different set of rules and regs, than a lot of people, because I'm just a private contractor. I'm not super military, this or that. I just do my stuff, and you run across a lot of weird stuff. And some stuff has got to be off record, and it's usually not the weird stuff. It's just stuff that would be bad to have general knowledge and could get me in trouble and cause problems for you. So that's why we have segmented things as such. And I just like to say hi to everybody that is out there and has expressed such nice wishes. And while some people have noted I'm not religious and have prayed anyway, I'd just like to say thank you for that. I'll take any prayer, not for my death. And ironically, we're in a win-win situation here for the positive community, because anybody who posts something negative or gives a dislike actually doesn't affect the channel and just increases the amount of interaction with the channel and just makes the channel actually grow more. So the only way people can hurt you, Jeff, out there is by not interacting with you. And so I call that a win-win.
Yes, it is. It is. That's why I've said it. I've said, like, if you want to, hit a dislike, it helps me either way. A bad comment helps me either way,
Oh, yeah. And a comment, if everybody went to the negative comment and said, thanks for contributing to the channel, then you'd get more interaction and the person would get turned off. Yeah. So it's a win-win. A couple of names I'd like to mention, and this is not in any particular order. I have scanned through the comments. thank you to all the people who liked it, and thank you to the detractors. You're helping everything out really well. One in particular, Yogi Steph, oh my gosh, you're just the nicest and kindest person. And some guy named the Villainy, that's pretty cool. Clayton, you're always asking really good questions.
Yeah.
There's Jody Bateman, maybe. He was actually talking
Jody's
about.
A good egg.
Yeah, he's actually made some really nice comments too. So thank you for that and bearing with me. There's a DV op spec, and if that means you did operation security, that's great. If you ever might be something interesting if you're actually an OPSEC person in the past to get a hold of Jeff, and maybe you can have a little OPSEC talk to explain to everybody about clearances and how all that works. I don't know. But if I left your name out, it's not because you're not important. It's because everybody has a lot of good comments and overall positive community. So I just like to say thank you to everybody. And don't worry, I'm doing well, and I think I'm recovering pretty well. My strength's coming back, and if I can get clearance to get a new hip after I'm clean, if that comes up, then my life will improve by leaps and bounds. And hopefully you and I, Jeff, can get together, and we both got places to explore.
Yeah, definitely do. And right before we end this, I want to say something is I remember the first time that you had shared, and you had seen the comment section, and you were kind of like, whoa. And then I said to you, listen, I said, I've got some of the best subscribers. I'm like, the ones that are commenting now are not the ones that are with my channel. I'm like, you wait until the ones that have followed my channel for the long time. I go, they will be diehards. And, Yogi Steph, one of them. And, she's always making great comments. Clayton, Jane, I've seen Jane make a couple great comments towards you as well. Just people are really good-hearted people in this in the community for my channel and our channel, and it's everybody's channel that listens to it. It's not just mine. So
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody, and it's a great little community. So I'm glad that you're comfortable here.
Well, you've helped me greatly develop a more conversational way to speak. I mean, I do hang around a lot of intelligent people, and I'm pretty smart, but I've met a lot more people with more wisdom than me. And, that's actually a big difference. So don't discount that.
Yeah.
So everybody's got something to contribute out there. And, I don't know, overall it's fun, and Jeff's helping me, be more of a city, which helps me actually, I believe, communicate better. So it's fun. I won't lose the technical for the people who like it, but we'll try it. I'm used to more. The first interview was more in debrief mode, going off my old operational notes and logs. So I like our more conversational style now.
I know, but I loved it too. I mean, and a lot of people did. I saw a lot of comments were like, "Yeah, we loved that," and it just. It's been fun having you on. I actually make mention in yesterday's video. I'm saying yesterday's, I haven't put it up yet, but the word caniform, and I'm like, and I love having stuff on because I learn words like caniform instead of saying canine, and so I appreciate you being here too. It's been real fun.
Yeah, I mean, knowing the difference between planigrade and digigrade, as just like, if we could teach everybody that, we'd actually have a ton more information on IDs really quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on. Well, thanks to everybody out there, even the ones who don't like me. And, keep the comments coming, good or bad, because it's not going to do anything. But the good ones are great. And anybody I didn't mention, sorry. I mean, I can only remember so many names really quickly. But cool. Well, Jeff, I'm going to call it a night, and I'll let you do your outro.
All right. Have a good night, my friend.
You too.
All right, guys. Wow. I really hope you all enjoyed today's subscriber interview. Steph, very informative, very intelligent, just full of information. And I know some people don't really like the way he talks or the way he uses his wording, but it's definitely different. And every once in a while, it is nice to hear, some new words tossed in the mix, I guess. Anyway, with that, please, everyone, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy. Thank you for all of your support, because without you, this channel would be absolutely nothing. I'd still do what I'm doing though, because I absolutely love it. But you just make it all the more better. So, may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path we call life.